Hello everyone, this is Amanda. It is Friday afternoon on a rainy day here in the Hudson Valley, and I've fed everyone, and I went down and fed all the animals. And I wanted to do a video today and talk about something, and this is going to be a touchy subject for some people, but I think there are some things that really need to be said right now. This school shooting that happened in Florida. This is a tragic, horrible, awful event that has taken place. And I will tell you, June 15th, 2017, which is well over, I think, 6 months ago, I posted a prophetic word from the Lord that the Lord had given me. And in it, it gave a little bit of a hint. And it said, a school shooting is coming, says the Lord. I have it on my computer right here. Certain areas of the United States of America have created an opportunity and a window for the enemy to launch an attack on schools. Pray for the safety of the little ones, says the Lord, for this is coming. And I posted it on my Facebook page, Amanda Grace. And it's never an easy thing when you have to post something like that, because you know it's coming. When the Lord gives it to you, when you're certain the Lord gives it to you, you know it's coming. And this one was one of the more horrific ones that we've had, this school shooting. And I want to talk about a couple of things because I saw some things on CNN and NBC that highly disturbed me. And I saw these soccer moms screaming like animals, blaming President Trump, acting a fool on national TV. And I will tell you, I am sorry for the people that lost children in this. It is a pain that is unimaginable. And it's an event you can never prepare for. But it does not give you the right to go on the media and act like animals, politicizing it when the bodies aren't even cold yet. The bodies in that school weren't even cold. And these people are getting on TV, acting like animals, screaming, carrying on. They're calling the kid that did this an animal. But yet they want to get on the media and act like an animal and politicize it immediately. In the wake of these horrific deaths. You know, there is a football coach who lost his life because he stepped in front of a bunch of kids and took those bullets. And instead of going on the media and these mothers honoring this man for what he did and honoring those that risked their lives so kids could live, instead they're screaming and politicizing it immediately. And you know, in the Word of God, it says, greater love hath no man than this, that one would lay down his life for the other. And that man is a hero. That coach is a hero for what he did. That is the greatest love of all. And he spared the lives of children and teens that were in the way for what he did. And that is what these mothers should be talking about on TV. And if they want to talk gun control, if they want to talk about guns, then you know what? Let them educate themselves first. Go on TV like respectful, upstanding citizens and logically lay out their case. And logically be a wordsmith about it and be thought-provoking. Because screaming in the midst of this isn't going to do any good. It's not. This is a tragedy, and screaming in the midst of it isn't going to help one iota. And so people that want to use their 15 minutes of fame at the cost of these children that died, how dare you? How dare you go on TV and do that? How dare you in the midst of this when there are teachers that lost their lives protecting your children? They took a bullet for your children. How dare you honor them and honor the dead by going on TV and by being thought-provoking and respectful and rational in the midst of chaos. That's what gets people attention. When that shooting happened at that church, I think was it in Charlotte? Was it in North Carolina? Did those people go on TV screaming and carrying on and acting like animals? No. And because they didn't, they were thought-provoking in their reaction. They caused the nation to think in their reaction. They caused the nation to have a conversation in their reaction. And I'm going to tell you, there are people screaming about guns, guns, guns right now. And guns don't kill people. People kill people. Unless somebody pulls that trigger, that gun can't do a thing on its own. Okay? And there are people in certain parties right now that are yelling about gun control. And these are the same individuals that surround themselves with security who are carrying more than one gun on them to protect them. So while they have guns protecting them with their security, they're yelling then how people shouldn't have guns. And I'm going to tell you this, responsible gun owners should not be punished for what wicked people, disturbed people do. It's like if your child studied real hard for a test and got a 96, and then another child in the class didn't study and got a 60. And the teacher went to your kid who got a 96 and said, I am punishing you and docking you 20 points because that kid didn't study and that kid didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so there has to be a real conversation about how responsible gun owners can be protected. I only believe police and military should have semi-automatic weapons, but we do have a right in the Constitution to bear arms. But I don't believe any civilian should have a semi-automatic weapon. I don't think right now they're necessary for civilians to have. But I will tell you that there is a dangerous platform because this kid that did this was an Antifa sympathizer. And do your homework, people. Do not believe what certain media outlets are saying. Don't let them spoon feed you, whatever the dialogue is. Do your research, because I will tell you the Democratic Party is indirectly funding and growing the Antifa movement. So the same party screaming about guns is the same party that is helping breed the Antifa movement, who are getting a hold of guns and doing these horrific things. And I have it right here, actually. Antifa is given life by the Democratic Party and those teetering dangerously on the cliff of a leftist ideology that looks to oppress, incite fear, and destroy. So the same people screaming about guns are also the same people indirectly supporting the Antifa movement, which is a highly dangerous movement. Antifa recruits similar how gangs recruit, how all gangs recruit. They recruit very similar. And however, when they recruit, their tactics are covered in tactical layers of deception to initially cover how dangerous and destructive this group really is. And they look for those who are disturbed, who are outcasts, who feels like nobody understands them, and this is how gangs recruit. And this is no different than how Antifa or any other organization that is hell-bent on terror recruits. I will tell you that 83% of gun owners overwhelmingly are in support of stricter background checks. Not only background checks. You know, I'm going to talk about this for a moment, okay? And then I'm going to talk about the downward spiral of schools. There should be a measure put in place, not only by the state of Florida, but by other states as well, that has a list, kind of like a watch list, like a no-fly list, a no-gun list, where any child expelled from school for violence, for mental instability, their name immediately goes on that no firearm list for 5 years. And they have to be evaluated by a mental health professional after the 5 years is up to say whether they are stable and they have been rehabilitated, or they are still unstable and have to stay on that no firearm list. And every time then someone goes to purchase a gun, the gun shops and the gun shows have to go, and online gun retailers as well, have to go to this list, this special state list, to see whether this person's name is on this list for violence and mental instability. And I believe that the schools, you see, the mothers are yelling about the government. The school knew this kid was violent. They knew he was a problem, okay? The superintendent of the school and the principal should have been on this with law enforcement, because a lot of kids knew this kid was capable of this. Where was the principal and the superintendent with this? Where were they in the midst of this? They should have been the ones on this. And this is why it's so important to adopt this list, this no firearm list of kids expelled from school, because then immediately the principal, the superintendent can report that name to that list. And immediately if that teenager or child tries to go buy a gun, they're rejected and they are unable to purchase any firearms. Because this needs to, there is a breakdown in communication between the schools and the state when it comes to this. And I will tell you that the schools in general have been on a downward spiral since 1962. Why since 1962, you ask? 1962 is the year prayer was removed from schools. And ever since then, schools have been on a downward spiral. They don't want to let prayer in schools, but then they get angry at God when something like this happens. And that's not fair at all, because God's a gentleman. You don't want him in your school. You don't want to have prayer in school. You don't think it's important to adopt a nature of prayer in school and children praying with each other and praying in agreement and praying for each other's needs. Instead, you know what school has become in the United States of America? And I'm going to get very real here. It's become a circus, a Snapchat, iPhone, iPad, music touting, headphone wearing, latest fashion, latest sneaker circus. School is no longer about education. Education has taken a back seat to keeping up with the Joneses, to having the latest and greatest trend that your friends have, having the latest and greatest phone, to music, to Snapchat. Education has taken a back seat. And I'm going to tell you something for parents out there who are screaming right now, okay? Your kids, and some of you parents are paying for this, for your children, okay, are being bombarded with violent music, violent video games that blur the lines of reality and fantasy, violent movies, violent TV shows, and, access to the internet to read all sorts of perverted things on Facebook, on chat rooms, on websites. And you parents out there are paying for a lot of this. You're paying for your kids to be bombarded with violence, okay? To be bombarded by it. Kids these days and teenagers are completely bombarded by negative stimuli, by negative messages, by violent messages, by messages of that put down women, by messages that it's okay to rebel all the time, by messages that have pimps and hoes and every other disrespectful foul word in it. And these singers are getting rich, okay, off of pumping garbage into your children. And you go, oh, it's harmless, it's music. Music opens up the spirit. And your kids' minds and lives are being influenced by these video game creators, by these musicians, by these TV shows. They're sending subliminal messages. Do yourself a favor. Educate yourself in advertising. Advertising is filled with subliminal messages. TV shows are filled with subliminal messages to get into the subconscious of the mind and influence it. It is a true fact. You don't believe me? Go look it up, because I used to take advertising in college and I know what I'm talking about when it comes to this. So what I'm telling you is schools, children, teens are being bombarded by negative, are being bombarded. Now you got kids constantly bullying other kids, to the point where kids are committing suicide. Okay? And you know what? The parents should be held accountable as much as the kids in a situation like that. Because, where were these parents that were screaming and yelling on the media just now when all these school shootings happened under former President Barack Obama? Where were they then? Why weren't they on the news screaming then? Why? Because it didn't happen to their kid? And now it's happened to their kid, so now it's got a lot more real? You know, my heart breaks for all the children's lives that were lost, but I think it's a disgusting thing for parents to go on the media and scream and blame. And when, you know what, they need to take a good look at themselves in the mirror also, and what they were encouraging in their children's lives, what they were encouraging their children to listen to, who they were looking the other way that their children were hanging out with, what their children are talking about on social media. You know, the parents should be more involved in the schools. If there's a kid that's troubled, you know what? The parents need to go in droves to that school and say, you know what? You need to do something about this kid because we're paying your salaries and we're not going to take it anymore. You see, the parents have to look at the school, the way the school is run, the teacher, and the state as well. Okay? They're looking at the federal government right now, and we're talking about a state level with this. We're talking about the way schools are run, the way superintendents run schools, the way principals run schools. And I'm going to tell you something. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, okay? And this is what happens with these school shootings. They happen over and over. The Democrats scream the loudest. And I will tell you, parents out there, the person screaming loudest isn't always the person that's the most active in solving that issue, isn't always the person that really cares the most about your child. Do yourself a favor. Go online. Educate yourself. Look at the paper trails. Look at what's really going on behind the scenes, not what CNN or NBC or ABC are saying. Okay? Educate yourselves on this subject because you know what? Don't let people spoon feed you whatever dialogue and agenda they want to get across. Okay? We live in a democratic republic, okay? And we need to start educating ourselves about what's really going on in the political parties and the political process and not what these major TV news outlets are saying, okay? Because all it's doing is causing more confusion and more chaos. And you know what? God is not the author of confusion and chaos. He is not. And for those people that are angry right now, you know what? Do yourself a favor. Start coming up with solutions. Start coming up with rational, logical, effective solutions. Start demanding it from your lawmakers. Logical, rational, effective solutions. Because these are the things we need right now. And I'm going to tell you something. You know why there are no school shootings in Israel like this? Because they wised up. Because they didn't make it political. They made the safety of the children first. And you know what they do at schools in Israel? A, this front door is locked. You have to be buzzed in. Nobody can just walk in to a school in Israel. They have to be buzzed in. B, there are teachers that in the Israeli schools that conceal carry and you don't know which teacher has a gun and who doesn't, okay? They're not allowed to broadcast it. They're not allowed to talk about it. And you know what? I will tell you something. It is an amazing deterrent for a mentally unstable individual like this if they think they're going to walk into a school and get shot. Okay? This kid that did this knew that when he walked into that school, no one had a gun. He knew he was the only one with a gun. And I will tell you, it's an amazing deterrent when a kid or an adult thinks they're going to walk into that school or that building and someone's going to shoot back at them. Okay? It is, trust me, it is a deterrent. And because Israel has school safety this way, they have no school shootings. They have no mentally unstable individuals just walking into their school. The United States should not have their schools and their immigration policy as open borders because the schools are doing the same thing. Open borders. Anybody can walk in. Anyone. A serial killer can walk in. It doesn't matter. Why? Because you're afraid of offending a few people? You know what? Worry about the safety of your children first. And you know what? Put buzzers in the school. Lock the school doors. Make people be buzzed in. Let teachers conceal carry. Because you know what? It's going to save more lives than you think. Because recently there was a school shooting where I believe there was it was either a plainclothes police officer that was off duty or it actually was a teacher at that school. Guess what? They had a gun and they were able to shoot back and they saved probably a huge amount of lives by doing that. You see, so gun control has to be a logical series of laws and preparations and lists, because you can't punish the good people who only will use that gun to protect and nothing else for the people who are mentally unstable. So everyone's got to get together here and come up with a system that the school can communicate with the state when a child gets expelled, when a child is showing violent tendencies, so they immediately go on a no firearm list. It is a very easy solution because schools are becoming doormats. They're becoming doormats for mentally unstable people that want to invoke terror. They're becoming doormats for bullies. They're becoming doormats for parents who want to bully. Okay? And the schools are there to educate. Okay? It is not there to be a three-ring circus that whoever can go in and cause whatever show and whatever drama they want to cause. You see, Israel doesn't tolerate that. And that is why Israel's schools are some of the safest schools in the world. And I believe the United States of America needs to adopt some of these policies that Israel has in place because they've been proven effective. Okay? So, when looking at what happened in Florida, don't immediately run to nobody can have a gun, because all the politicians right now screaming about that are surrounded by security with guns to protect them. And it's not fair that they can have it and then they're telling you you can't, okay? Because that is not a democratic republic then, okay? So don't let politicians so quickly lead you into believing that, because they do have security around them. However, if enough people get together in a civilized, respectful manner and start telling the school and the state, we want these lists, we want these no firearm lists for teenagers. We need the school communicating with law enforcement and the state at all times about what kids are a danger inside the school. Then I think you're going to see a lot less problems when it comes to mentally unstable teenagers trying to buy a gun. Also, if you put buzzers in the school and keep the school doors locked and you have to be buzzed in, you have to show ID, and there's got to be a reason you're coming. And have teachers conceal carry, even if you have teachers carry tasers. You know what? A taser with about 10,000 volts will put someone down now, won't it? So these measures should be adopted in order to begin to make schools safer, because right now the conversation has become insanity. These shootings are happening over and over again. You've got a lot of these Antifa sympathizers behind it. You know, you want to talk about the zombie, kids talk about you hear kids all the time talking about the zombie apocalypse. You know what the real zombie apocalypse is? These kids that are being raised to be mindless probes that will just be spoon-fed whatever dialogue a teacher or a professor spoon-feeds them, or Antifa spoon-feeds them, or social media spoon-feeds them, where they do not think for themselves and go and research and really think about the issue, where they just follow along with whatever crowd is screaming the loudest. And you know what? That's the real that kids want to talk about zombie apocalypse, because these kids are becoming mindless probes that are not raised to think for themselves, to read and check facts and really think about the issue from all sides, think about solutions, come up with effective solutions, because this is the next generation. And we're making their brains pudding by putting all this negative stimuli, like I said, the video games, the music, social media, keeping up with the Joneses, the technology, the phones, and then you've got these teachers that will bully kids into whatever agenda they want them to believe. You are there to teach. You are not there to politicize. And this is the kind of environment now that is happening in schools, and then people go, we can't believe this happened. It is a bubbling cauldron when you take all of these different stimuli, all of these different events, all of these different circumstances, and put them together. You have a cauldron that is completely bubbling over, and not in a good way. And it is explosive. They're creating an explosive, toxic environment in schools, and then they're leaving the doors open for somebody to just come and light the match. And then the people are going, well, how did this happen? This is how it happened. And you know what? It has to stop, because there are kids being killed in the midst of this, okay? There are lives being lost, Let these people have their funeral before you start screaming about whatever, nonsense you want to scream about on the news to have your 15 minutes of fame. How dare you? These parents haven't even buried their children. And for the parents who are going on the media screaming, you know what? Instead of screaming and carrying on, go put your heads together and start coming up with effective solutions. Go see Pam Bondi, petition the Attorney General, come up with effective, thought-provoking solutions that actually help get things done. Because right now, there's a lot of hurt, and there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of pain. And I will tell you something. The Lord gives beauty for ashes. And the Lord can give you beauty for ashes. And you know what? God is still in the midst of this. He is still on the throne. And you know what? He says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven, forgive their sin, and heal their land. And right now, people need to be on their knees crying out to God, asking the Lord to open doors for effective solutions so these things do not happen anymore. Asking the Lord for wisdom and for clarity and for doors to open for real change in these schools so that innocent children don't have to keep getting, don't have to be in harm's way because the next school didn't learn from the last school shooting. When a school shooting happens, the other schools should learn from that shooting. They should go analyze it. The superintendent, the principal, teachers should all sit down and analyze that school shooting. What happened in this school shooting? How did this person get in? What did they sympathize with? What was their record in school? What were their grades like in school? What violent tendencies did they have? Analyze the entire situation and then go, okay, this is what this school didn't do, but we're going to learn from their mistake, because a wise person doesn't learn from their own mistakes. They learn from other people's mistakes so they don't have to make the same mistake. And the schools need to sit down and do this and then invoke policy, so that then they aren't susceptible to the same misfortune, to the same mistakes, to the same tragedy. And parents should be knocking down the superintendent's door, saying that we demand you get together with the teachers and the principal and the state and the attorney general and not only adopt policy, but go look at the policies of countries like Israel. Go look at countries or states that have adopted policies that actually work, and then adopt those same policies. Because you know what? That's the only way effective change is going to happen in this. And that's the only way it's going to be stopped. Because in this time we're living in right now, it is a violent, ungodly, perverted, nonsensical, confusing, dysfunctional, chaotic time. And with kids also, it all starts at home. How they're being raised. Who's raising them? What they're being allowed to absorb in their spirits. What they're being allowed to watch. Who they're allowed to hang out with. Paul says in Corinthians, do not be deceived. Bad company corrupts good habits. If you're letting your kids check out Antifa, if you're letting your kids hang out with kids that are rebellious, and that drink, and that do drugs, and that are hell-bent on violence, let me tell you, they will drag your child down quicker than your child will ever drag them up. So you know what, parents? Be proactive in your kids' lives, what they're watching, what they're doing, and some parents go, oh, we have to let them make their own mistakes. Yes, but you know what? If you go let a kid make a mistake by shooting up a bunch of other kids because you weren't paying attention, that's on you, and that's a foolish thing to do. You should be really involved in what your kids are opening themselves up to, because there are spiritual implications for everything you do, whether you want to believe that or not. Just because you don't want to believe the truth doesn't mean the truth doesn't exist. And there are spiritual implications for everything you do in life. And you know what? Parents need to start getting more serious about what they're exposing their kids to, because it is getting in their spirits. And being a teenager in this day and age, it is hard. It is depressing. It is difficult. There is so much negative stimuli, music, garbage being thrown at these kids. And you know what? It's time for the parents to rise up and say, you know what? Hollywood and musicians and video game makers and social media is not going to dictate who my kid comes out to be, who my kid is raised up to be. They are not going to dictate ideals in my kid. That is not going to happen, because I'm going to have a child of character, who is thought-provoking, who is respectful, who is honorable, who, when they speak, it causes people to listen. It causes solutions. It causes thought-provoking conversations to take place. That's the kind of kid I want to raise. I want to raise a kid who loves the Lord with all their heart, soul, and mind, who does not lean on their own understanding, but in all their ways they acknowledge the Lord, and He will make their path straight. And I am encouraging you in this day and age, you know what? Go to the Lord, go to God's Word, encourage your children to be not soldiers for Antifa, not soldiers for Hollywood, soldiers for the Lord. Because you know what? When it comes down to it, what is taught in the Word of God, children are taught to respect their parents, to be respectful, to follow the leading of the Lord. They are taught to be thought-provoking. They are taught to have wisdom. You know, there's nothing wrong with those ideals. In fact, in this day and age, people make fun of those ideals and call them strange. They're not strange. You know, living your life constantly in a perverted, Snapchat, social media, nonsensical, violent, fantasy, chaotic, dysfunctional rage is not normal. And it is slowly becoming more the norm. Dysfunction is creeping in and taking over normalcy. And then people wonder why things like this happen. You know why? Because instability does not breed stability. It breeds more instability. And the more unstable these schools are becoming in their morals, in their values, in that education is not at the helm of what the school's doing, that the kids are allowed to be influenced by all sorts of outside sources that talk about violence and beating up women and pimps and twerking and all sorts of things that, you know what, in the scheme of things are not important. It is trash. It is all trash. It is important to be raised up to be a person of character, to be a person of morals, to be a person of good standing, to be an individual of wisdom, and an individual that has good speech, an individual that comes up with ideas that help people, not hinder them, that encourage those around them to become better people, that breed success in other people. This is what we should be focusing on with our children. And it all starts,